Englewood Avenue, 1958, 1959. The music makes a black spiral. Beethoven said more than Keats, because he spoke of darkness, and Keats spoke of beauty, and the darkness is beyond beauty and contains it. Beauty is a circle. The darkness is a black spiral. The music makes a black spiral, with the sky empty around it and oppressing, but yielding. There are no stars above it, only vanishing, transplanted circles. Existence meets and overcomes itself, and overcomes itself, and is always above itself. Sleep no more, Beethoven. Bugs and spiders and lightning hide beneath the leaves, and crickets scream against the rain and darkness. Thunder on a quiet street, all the days seem wet and evil, full of time and rumbling, evil here and evil coming. The one strength in the wind blows the leaves apart and upward, flickering with the small shadows of fire. The day is wet and cold and filled with a simple fear. The day laughs with the chill of night, shivering as her sweater of leaves falls in my heart. The night is a prostitute with harsh voice and hairy wrists, a virgin who does not speak with shy hands. Both together, I hear them both together, mad twins linked at the waist. We live for the other, for her smile that never comes, for the laughter from the silver place, for the word which touches everything, for the light, warm touch, for the scar that draws tight the wound, for the moment between motion and stillness, and light and darkness. What we are is what we cannot be. Calling. The sky gave him nothing, a somber, unbecoming grimace, a threat of rain. But then he turned to look through the window in the rear of the house. The curtains blew back with the wind. The clouds weakened. A breeze blew clean through the hallway, and the curtains and clouds parted. It was as if the window opened over a deep pool, a drop, a descent which was his, to make his own, as if someone had brushed a soft, warm deck of solitaire deftly from a table, and the table, cleared, had become a writing table, a well cover of clearest substance, and a lens, compounded with the depth of water, and the drop he looked through, the fall of the Presbyterians, focused on forever. The night was clear down. Far below, the stars were tiny points, poetic and metaphysical. The sky was neither blue nor black. It was dark, umbral, tasteless, drop on drop descending from the drop down. The sky began to shiver, and the rain fell. He felt as if he were sitting in the back seat of the car he was driving. It was late at night, and the streets of the town were empty. Montreat. The last few sunbeams scatter above the sisters. The first few shivers of night settle. The sun sends up the last splinters as it falls into the tree limb, waiting. A woman looks out a kitchen window and stirs the broccoli. A young man looks out an upstairs window and stirs a pin and fills himself with silence. A child pedals her trike 3 houses down the sidewalk and glances up as if to look through the darkness. A car rides on to midnight. A squirrel slips across familiar limbs in the still air. House lights blink on and off down the concrete, and occasionally there's a long pause in sound and movement. Voices disappear above a window. Voices splinter against the shallow winter air. Tired, warm, supper voices. Angry, hungry voices over a bus stop. A hushed voice hesitates at a window, spinning a frayed kite thread over the pews and hymnals, into the wide silence above us. Like a small part which lifts its melody above the aisle for a few notes, then returns to the choir, the voice disappears from the window into the street noise and decaying silence. Sing with me, the voice sings. Abide with me. The day in winter is like a young, slender wife with a thick pink belly, hidden by a loose dress, leaning over a porch in the wind. The thunder made it a marble house, clean and black and cold as the rain. The leaves were concubines of an emasculated sun, broken wings in the houses of the bats. Old stone kitchens down there, with the clock ticking up the stairs. Englewood Avenue, 1959. Spring. Stillness, limping along over top the small night sounds. A million small bells from a house, now and then ringing. A worn sheet flapping above the grass, light wind. A radio melody like a spool sent far above the roofs. A troubled, laboring engine circling elsewhere. Then a piece of laughter within all of them, like a shiver of glass against the tired, unyielding stillness, piercing a throbbing vein while it collapses and the blood flows evenly. Carpenters, cinder blocks, dirt, and brown hands, touching them with diffidence and care. Colored fellow walks, no hurry, caring for a brown paper bag, crosses the bare spot beside the church, stops, waits for a bicycle, passes over, shuffles along the street, looks backward, slows by the carpenters, points to the bag. Long gone.
Hey there, look at that man. He ain't gonna work tomorrow. Hey, boss, you got a squirrel in that poke?
Man doesn't hear. Fine man. He don't have to ride that truck tomorrow. Reaches the sidewalks, the shaded streets, headed for Sedgefield, home and a woman. The sun begins to drain off into the long shadows. Its colors are sweet as the last drops of a bottle of rye. Bob, Bob, on a river. Oh, oh, no steam for him, no man. Float along smooth as you please. Po' boy off by the railroad track, in June a-looking for a long locomotive to carry him away as far as L.A., to find him a home and freedom. The dusk is beaten down into the grass. Along the street women walk, their foreheads slightly wet with the darkness. Part of it comes from within them, perspiring. The women help the night make the dew. A dog kicks the dirt back and runs into grass blowing through a field. Like a shower of fine rain, the buds fall out into the air, sprinkling it with light colors. Around each color is an empty place, making room. Spring is expectancy, a held breath. The soul of the world is pondering, dipping its brush in green. The cars run smoothly through the streets, breaking the water with the sounds of small sailboats, in the quiet, far-away sounds, thunder approaching, hammers on timber, while the clouds loft and billow and smoke with the purest whiteness. The hawks perch their wings wide in the sky, flying evenly under the clouds, as if resting above a world waking in tenderness from delirium. The cherry trees are shaking now, chained and naked, covered with bloom. The wingless drift of their becoming slowly precipitates the colored rain of the small birds, carrying thick drops, splashing their color and fragrance. We begin to feel the depth of new sleep. Its dimensions expand, and slowly we too are within it. Silence lifts itself upward. The birds sing themselves into the quietness. From the lawns pale and vanish. A timorous wind hesitates in the high blossoms. Then, with a gesture of pleasant fatigue, a thin cloud brushes against the moonlight, as if to say, it is time to retire. Even the leaves, even the waters, even myself. Now sleep is a deep pool at last, containing the moon and an unnoticed sun, and the dreams within it flicker and start endlessly, interrupted by the penetrating glances of moonlight, until the soft decay of the bottom is reached, and we lie hidden. In my world it is snowing the drops of light and life. The shadows are brief and warm. Spiders climb busily through the air, leaving their trails in the wind. Butterflies with yellow wings dip and drift through the gardens. Red bugs crawl over the rich and sweating limbs. I do not wish to move. Mine would be the only moving shadow. Everything else is a point and a movement of light. Bell. This entry is dated 2/3. Entry. Edge of the city. Threshold. Building. Bell. After the metro from Saint-Michel, I begin to wonder where everybody is in this brand new apartment cité. The concierge, the doorman, but there is no one. Personne, not a soul about the complex. There's nobody here, nor is there a main door, but the only entry appears on the side, and would seem a side entrance, if I could find the main door, or a way into the basement, for it stands on a bare spot beside an eroded ditch, from which some loose dirt trickles onto the cement at my feet. I keep going around the building, but the other walls present rows of thick curtains behind glass, which seem to keep my erratic stumbling noises in the dark outside from entering into the rooms. I enter unheard then, probably, at the entree on the side, between two rectilinear arrays of gleaming mailboxes set in the walls. There's another feeling, another sense to the building inside. There's a hard new fabric on the floor. The textures are unfamiliar. I do not recognize the sounds. There is no remnant in me of these metallic echoes of footsteps on the floor, above the mailboxes, along the tiled ceiling, through the long, curved hallway, and throughout the building, the clang of a door closing like a cell's. Is it the high polish on the ceiling, or the small glass lozenges in the mailboxes, or the sheen of the new synthetic substances in the bare floor of the vestibule, which sends up these distracting sparkles over the glass door in the entree, and the blue translucent pane around the sonnerie? I think as I move along the passage, there is something primitive in the new, as in the earth, in the dense, repellent substances I feel but cannot remember, or trace to any feeling familiar to me. But some are alien, some are new creations. But this building was then on the horizon, under what was left of a denuded, flattened knob or hillock, covered with wiregrass, weed, rusted coils, lopsided fragments of brick, cement block, barbed wire, and spears of twisted aluminum, wrenched or sheared off, abandoned, left stuck in the ground in random places, detritus upreared from the horizon of the mound, and smaller bits of rubble had washed or been swept downhill to the edge of the pavement, and underfoot caused me to stumble into the cratered luster of this moonlike terrain. As I left the smooth surface of the street and mounted the crude new colline, slowly the top of the building became visible, as if some presence in the ground were lifting it slowly, as if it were emerging slowly from underwater. And as I found a path which receded from the light of the street, the surface of the field in the near distance grew smooth and appeared to be illuminated, cast in another light, and carried a different feeling, not of upheaval, but of something bare, virginal, unmarked, like the feeling of the new matière I would discover a moment later. Yet the apartment building, though I would enter it in a moment, seemed only a low warehouse or locomotive. The windows of the upper story raised themselves along the brow of the hill, peering over. It was this light that came over the near horizon. It was the proximity of the horizon, and the sudden appearance of the line of windows set just above the ground, before I knew there was a building, which gave the earth a guarded feeling, a dull presence, a uniform glare, as of a guarded area, a surface watched over, illuminated by a fluorescence of surrounding walls, watchtowers, in which the lamps were positioned, protected, adjusted low, because the surveillance was extremely attentive, the guardians watchful. The building seemed cleft in half. I was in a declivity, a decline. The road sloped down and up the next hill in an unbroken curve to the upper windows. It was the address of the Austrians, transients I didn't know, cousins, so I had heard, of someone I had met twice before, between rooms, awaiting some word to leave the city. But they were not at home, yet I couldn't be certain of the sonnerie, if the bell worked, if it were ringing, if it were connected. I could not hear, I could not feel, if it were connected, if it left my fingertips, ran on inside. For the resonance of the subway from Saint-Michel, a sound not in the air alone, but in the vibration, the drumming noise inside the corridor, in my ears, the headache which seemed overhead, dispersed in the air of the building. Then there seemed faint pulses within the house, a current from the wire that registered, a feeling, a distance traversed, a passage, a movement inward along the corridor, a distance touched, traversed with the forefinger tip of my writing hand, a feeling of unheard echoes. I stopped ringing the bell and turned toward the crest of the hill, where there are other, smaller houses, spaced apart. I move under them and notice the tiny recessed cubes in the blank back walls, small bathroom windows overlooking an abandoned field and a ravine. New houses arranged on plots, staked off from other squares remaining empty, the backs set on concrete posts over the ravine. There is nowhere to go. The field, the ravine, the glowing walls of the houses, the light of space, the feeling of the new floor, the resonance of Saint-Michel, the moment inside. It is here then. This. On the road from Delphi. Seeding places. Seminal matrices. Expectanda. George Steiner. There is, or was, some 30 years ago, a small domed Greek Orthodox church down the road from Delphi. I walked toward it once, half expecting to see the interior of a sanctuary, choir, altar, all the accoutrements of a disused chapel, neglectfully maintained. A sacred image on the ceiling, faces or stars, candles, a deacon. The outside was run down looking, but still monumentally intact, built for the eons. I looked in, out of the bright attic sun, blinded at first by the obscurity, the dust-laden density of straw, disturbed and decomposing. I breathed in the awareness of this, absorbed it in my pores before I saw it. In the center there was no altar, no stone or tile or wood beneath the soaring cupola. The floor was of earth, and straw was scattered over it. And in the center the straw had been gathered into a crude pallet, where two figures lay outstretched in each other's arms, asleep. The translation of all this into my awareness took several minutes, as my eyes became adjusted to the shadows, and my mind to the strangeness of something at once so powerful and so unexpected, and yet fundamental, as basic as what I'd looked for and not found, embedded there. Not yet awakened. But my first impression was of atmosphere, Only toward the end of this long moment did I begin to focus on the crucial, still sleeping, detail. The general sense was of a spacious, shadowy emptiness in the vaulted interior, which was yet full of something intangible, yet present in my awareness. In part, this was the smoke-like dust and odor of straw floating above bare earth, above the stripped and yet, and therefore, fundamental aspect of what remained, in the shell of what had been, the shell of what had seemed to be still as I approached it. Then slowly the sleepers emerged in the center of my awareness, together with the knowledge that they were, even as I was, strange there, that they were not of that place, that they would not be there long, that whatever peace or fulfillment they found there, whatever release or revelation they brought to each other or took from it, would be theirs in that place only then, even as with them and because of them, mine would be also, that this moment which was given us would never recur. But for me, for the moment, it, the manger, the once sanctuary, the shell with its central plan, its memory of a cosmos, gathered about them, upreared and concentrated upon them, all its grave majesty and power, all the sweet resonance of its geometries, and that of the dream for which it stood. What I saw slowly and felt more than saw, in part because the seeing took so long, emerging within the slowly forming awareness of loss, of the fatal passing of something and of all that is great and to be treasured, was not just the crucial detail, the tantalizing datum undisclosed on its makeshift cot. It was the residual power, felt more than seen, but felt through the seeing, of the massive, symmetrical half-sphere, poised above the altar that was not there. Then and only then, the building came into focus on the not yet awakened, the yet unrealized natal moment. Now, at the axial point, in the core of itself, which the sleepers momentarily occupied. There they lay, in the shadows, before my eyes and in them, in the desecrated dust, in the radiance of their strangeness, in the strange world, in the given world. From a tape labeled Downfall, I'm back in August, late August of '91. I want to read some notes from May the 7th. I was thinking about Appalachian fall again, in Philo's sense of fall, of degradation, decay, the passing of the beautiful, of the animals, the birds, and the trees, of the great life and the spirit which impelled it, which so enriched and amplified his own. And I was wondering if the poverty of his life on the mountain and its severe constraints hadn't opened him to this life and its treasures because he had no other. And now I'm thinking in terms of the funeral, Flora Lightfoot's funeral, which I've been writing about some, a passage from which began this tape, on the other side of the tape. How the apogee, how the moment of grace, which for me was the moment of Flora's burial high on the cemetery hill, when Philo turned in the midst of the family and said goodbye to Flora. How that is followed by breakdown, almost necessarily it seems. The family members going deeper into grief and losing touch with each other in the process, so that there's a disintegration. The words escaped him, his goodbye, Mama, goodbye. They surprised him. He was unprepared for them, and so were we. The words became a cry from outside the ceremony, outside the order of things. They swept through the tent like a sudden breeze from elsewhere, from high on the Hammonds field, the Luster field, the coal fields, from transit camps, logging camps, CCC camps, from barracks, boxcars, haystacks, fodder shocks, Salvation Army shelters, from bridges flung high above rivers, and blew through the words expected of us in the close air, from outside, where he had lived his life, through the stale air, the dead air, the air of the dead we breathed in and lived on. Like Celan's Niemand's Rosa. But back in May, I was thinking about the panorama, the long view of Cleo's sorrow, her lifelong sorrow, really, and yet longer than her life, since its thread reaches back at least to her grandfather, Thad Wellborn, mayor of West Jefferson, North Carolina, and Glade. Catastrophe passing down through generations, one mistake or mishap to another, the father to the daughter, to the son, to the granddaughter, and on. Cleo's failure to advise Laurie, or to prevent her, to caution her sternly against Al Asher. Now I see as descending, or falling, or continuing her descent from her ancestors, from her grandfather's abandonment of her mother's mother, and of her mother and aunts. A part of the same current, downward passing stream or cataract, which swept her and Laurie away down to Rice Terrace, through a dozen grimy trailer courts and drug dens. Now I see, with Cleo and through her, the long train of downfalls, of steps descending, the the wrongdoing of one generation that lives in the successive ones, until, stripped of every advantage, it becomes a pure and uncontrollable mischief. Hawthorne. So the father and grandfather, Thaddeus, gave them his learning, his gentleness and civility, and left them with nothing and no recourse. And partly through Cleo and partly through Philo, her brother, I see Thad's daughter, their mother. When they first come into the mountains, across the river into Virginia, when Thaddeus become mayor of Glade, she was the most beautiful woman anybody had ever seen in those parts. And she was courted by a gentleman, Sam Dillard, the high sheriff, which was an office that carried honor back then. But Laurie didn't marry him. When her mammy took them back to North Carolina, Laurie met and married Reuben Lightfoot, a man without distinction, who detested distinction, a rabid leveler, hater of the Thad Welborns of earth, and so, maybe, her sole brother, who spent his nights fighting, drinking, and card-playing, and dancing and fiddling, being as wild and passionate a dancer as she was, and she'd won many prizes, and his days cutting extract wood for 30 cents a cord, and whose mind was damaged early in a fight with English Potter, the most feared man in Ashe County. That Potter, he'd ride right past the sheriff's office with his saddlebags full of liquor in a graveyard outside West Jefferson, so that by the time they finished, they'd toppled several tombstones, and Reuben had hurt that Potter, so he had to go to bed afterwards for the first time ever, a man almost twice his size. But in revenge, Potter stomped his head against a tombstone with hobnail boots and left him for dead, damaged him for life, and for lives, many lives, and many generations. These light feet, what is it about them that so appeals? It's Cleo looking out, as if she could look from the ovens in Dachau, or the embers in Nagasaki, as if reaching down in her fall, she could touch some hidden stream or conduit in the deep life of my century, and relate it, conduct it to me, the current in the bonds which hold her in, charges me even now to keep in touch with what I feel to be most real, most full of darkness, as if I could jump the freight with her brother on the Black Cut out of Chilhowie and find myself sealed in on the potato fields outside Krakow, and greet the strangers and thank them for who they are. Here's a passage from March, a little earlier. I wrote this with Carl Planck in mind and to him after reading his essay on my work. For years I was working in a vacuum. It was deliberately chosen, but still it was hard sometimes. I used to go deeper into the mountain to cut wood above the Price graves. I remember the sharp thud on the opposite ridge from the Luster field where the Lightfoot cabin was, as if someone were there, working beside me, driving an axe blade into a deadlock. as if no one were there, no one else. I'd clap my hands and listen to the stillness and emptiness of the mountains, and to the echo which scored the stillness, for it was this sound of stillness, as this stillness was of absence, the absence of the hoot owl and the screech owl, the woodpecker and wood thrush, the wildcat and bobcat, the panther and the whippoorwill. Of all the great animals, the small game and birds, which my friend and guide, Philo, has described for me so vividly, making the mountain come alive again in memory. Of Lou Brown, a mysterious woman. Nobody knowed where she come from, or why she come here. Of Rube Woods, her murderer. Of the ghost of Lou Brown. Of Ellen Walden, who built up fires and slept by the road with her 36 Colt. Of Abe Fullen, the black man she lived with and had a child by. Bob Walden, who was raised by Jim Walden, a white man whom Ellen married. And she made him the cleanest wife you ever saw. Of the 8 black brothers who were poisoned and buried in a common grave where a poplar had blowed over by the one brother who was sick and hadn't eaten. Then he went and hanged himself out by the Tin Bridge. So they call it to this day the Hangman Woods. Of Romy, the bee-man from the north of Naples, master mason, calligrapher and grafter of fruit trees. Of Private Riffy, who shot Stonewall, or so he believed, hoed corn and reflected. Of Laurie Welburn, the mayor's daughter, who hoed corn also and took in washing. Of Laurie's daughter, Cleo Lightfoot, the flower of the mountain. Of the Lightfoots in the Lightfoot holler, of the bird songs in the bird song holler, of whom I have thought much and written elsewhere. But I was thinking of Carl when I wrote this. Carl, we must not despair. We must not lose hope, because the road to the kingdom is, as Buber describes it, paved with unknowns, even with defeat in the world's eyes. The road to the kingdom is the road of victory, though the road is endless and the victory is of no one. So many having fallen, that the way not be lost, that the world once common to all of us might be recalled and restored. So this is March 4th. I'm thinking of the spoons in Carl's essay, with photograph he sent me, cutlery unearthed in forest floor, Auschwitz. Spoons, like miniatures, sculptures, so many hollowed out, buried, surfaced of late, scratched from the topsoil, matted in humus, in fibrous roots, in sylvan dell, pastoral, idyllic, like klopstock, hundreds held open, hollowed out, holding nothing, like hands, bare, open, like faces on their long necks, cupped and held open on the vacant sky, like Fremda, strangers stripped of spoons, as of clothing, as of words, as of rights, as of sex, as of civility, as of thoughts, as of a thought like this, in quiet mind, in glowing woodland. A thought of openness, of vulnerability, of the long, curved body of the handle, spreading toward the neck, widening into the head cup, like an open eye on its neck stalk, an open mouth, an open mind, a thought that there will be something there to receive. How strange to think in freedom, in quiet mind, in glowing woodland. A spoon is waiting, trustful, that there is something there which may be received. A spoon is open, like a violin, to the music which may be held for a moment in it, and so received. And like a hand to its gift, as to all the gifts, to the gift of all. Even as it holds us, as it delivers its spoonful to the mouth, which opens to it. It reminds me too of Hannah Kali, when she first came to the mountain, her back bald, plastered with oil, as of higher mammals, dolphins, sea otters, drowning in oil, tangled in nets after Valdez, elephants in the zoo in Kuwait City, shot by the Iraqis, lumps in hide where bullets went in. The spoon holds the thought in its openness, a violation in the eyes of the great creature. So they turn from the camera. They do not want to look at us or anything we have, to stay, be looked at. They are caught, pinned. They cannot go anywhere. They can only look away. Yet the look is open, despite itself, receptive, like a thought in quiet mind, in glowing woodland. The eye is God's spoon. So many buried, so many hidden, so many still packed together, still, in matted roots, in quiet woodland. Yah, Fremda, stripped, gaping, eyeless, earless, mouthless, voiceless, concave. Be wakeful, reminds us a remnant. Be mindful, beware. Even of a thought like this, in quiet mind, in glowing woodland. Remember, beware. What is held together. What is held may be spilled, may fall, may not be delivered, may never be raised again to the mouth. so must be held carefully, so must be raised carefully, be held in a balance, held firmly, held delicately, like the word in the mouth, with precision, with care. Winter Flow. First letter to Marlea on the long trains. 1:10. Marlea, I've never understood you. How consistently you abandon your defenses, safest strongholds, strategic positions, supply trains, armor, logistics, and all. Like Georg Trakl, my poet of the century, before the carnage at Grodeck in 1914. I saw you today with only your fifes and a few ragged pennons rise from your bed in the infirmary and walk out into the field. It rang a bell. I thought, whatever moved this is rare, priceless because costly, without returns. But this is what powers what matters to me. The rest of what passes for speech is mostly inertia, coasting downhill smoothly after having mounted on others' steam. But what moves and persists from the heart drives the rest of us also, and those others whose supply lines may be stretched too far, because they labor in remotest fields, in the most improbable reaches of outlying life, where once they were transported from what they were and cannot return. But maybe they'll slake their thirst for a moment when they need it most and be restored, together with the powers which conveyed them there, maybe once only, and far from here, or very near. But we must find the reservoirs, the collecting points, to pool those powers and preserve them, for when the long trains pass through, on their way into the desert. Now I'd return, dear Marlea, some portion of the fierce distress laid bare in your letter. I dream of being severed, cut loose and floating down into the dark like a maple wing, spiraling out of the sun. But the core, the seed inside, wants out of its husk. It's like working on a stone bridge made of stalactites, condensing drop by drop out of dreams, out of the work done, out of the tears of the fragile beings I've caused to suffer. There is no stopping place, no turning point, no return. I'm way out over it now, and the fall is endless. But maybe the trains will pass over, with all their transports, through link on link, word on word, that bear the vibrations, the massive connections, the recollections in chains, the long supply lines trickling out of dreams into the desert that will not stop for me.
Walking with Noah in crowded city, evening. We're dressed in dark clothes. The sky is dark with rain. We cross many intersections, holding hands in silence. Holding hands in silence. Walking with Noah. Walking with Noah. Walking with Noah. Crowded city. Crowded city. Crowded city. We're dressed in dark clothes. Crowded city. Sky is dark with rain. The sky is across many intersections, holding hands in silence. In silence. In silence. In silence. Evening. Walking with Noah with rain. Sky is dark. Rain. Evening. With rain. We're dressed in dark clothes. We cross many intersections. Sky is dark. We cross many intersections. Sky is dark. We cross many intersections. Evening. Holding cross many intersections. Holding hands. 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 Holding silence. We cross many intersections. In silence. In crowded city. Crowded city. Crowded city. Crowded city. Walking with Noah in crowded city. Evening. We're dressed in dark clothes. The sky is dark with rain. The sky is dark with rain. We come to an old stone church. It is cold and empty. Long silence and dark shadows. Small faceless choir chants evensong. They do not see us. We know that they sing, whether anyone comes or not. We come to an old stone church. We come to an old stone church. We come to an old stone church. It is cold and empty. Long silence. Long silence and dark shadows. Small faceless choir chants evensong. They do not see us. We know that they sing. We know that they know that they sing. We know that they sing evensong. We know that they sing evensong. We know whether anyone comes or not. We know that they sing. They sing. We know that they sing evensong.